It's my pleasure to welcome you to Conversations on Soul Luckman Uncensored, sponsored by snooze2awaken.com, resources for lucidity. For more information about my work, including tons of cutting-edge free content, visit crowrising.com. I'm also on Telegram at t.me/soulluckman, as well as Substack at soulluckman.substack.com, where I've just released my new book, Musings from a Small Island. This self-illustrated memoir will have you alternately bursting with laughter and bursting at the seams with new perspectives on life, death, and the curiouser and curiouser cosmos we call home. For a limited time, you can laugh along with the complete text with a free 7-day trial, which will also give you access to a wealth of additional premium content. Also, please mark your calendar for Errant Fest, Decoding the Simulation to Survive and Thrive Together, coming September 22nd through 24th to a virtual location in the comfort of your own home. Stay in the loop by signing up for the chat at substack.com/chat/869093. If you're a researcher, author, influencer, or content creator interested in talking visionary fiction, energy medicine, shamanism, simulation theory, and related topics with me on this show, by all means, drop me a line. I'm also open to coming on other podcasts as a guest to drill down into what's up in the simulacrum and how we can survive and thrive here. If you really appreciate what I'm doing here, I'd really appreciate your buying me a coffee, which I'll be sure to sip in your honor at buymeacoffee.com/soulluckman. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Mike Wilkerson of the Stellium7 YouTube channel, which is definitely turning a lot of heads in the alternative history and science communities of late. Dr. Mike is a chiropractor living in Spain who, as it were, stumbled his way into the emerging field of biogeology. Evidence is mounting, we read on his channel, that what we think of as geology is actually biogeology. We are quite literally walking and living on the remains of all of those that lived before. They are small, giant, and even titanic in size. It's becoming clear that geology needs desperately to be revisited with new eyes and revived. Amen. Welcome to Soul Luckman Uncensored, Dr. Mike. Thank you for joining me today or this evening in your time zone.
Thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've been binge watching your material for a few weeks and participating in some of your chats and whatnot. At least on one chat, I attended a live, and lots of energy and interest. And I know you did a recent interview with Jason Bashirs, and that's brought a lot of traffic to your channel. Has that been a breath of fresh air to have a lot?
Yeah, a lot of new people and really, positive comments on the content, and not just going to the latest video, but actually churning through some of the past videos, which is always nice to see, because sometimes people hop on and they sub because they saw you somewhere, but they don't really have a clue what's come before and what you've been doing. And so some of them are actually doing that and going back to older stuff and commenting. And it's wonderful to see, because a lot of the old videos, they don't get much action or comments. And that's where a lot of my research is, actually. I've done a lot of interviews, and I've kind of branched out into some different topics in the last year or so. But I'm not one to just keep repeating things over and over again. So, some of the best material is some of the stuff that I did in the first year or two.
Yeah, so you would recommend the Titan series to people as one thing people could dive into?
Yeah, that's how the whole channel started. Looking into this idea that maybe Titans once actually existed, and that they're not just myth and fairy tale, but that perhaps there's some concrete evidence for their existence. And so that's kind of how the whole channel began. And then as I began to look at geology and the mountains and things around me with new eyes, I started to recognize other things along the way, and that led to some additional discoveries that occupied the next year or so of work on my channel, and that has to do with what I call petrified organs, and this idea that instant petrification is a real thing, and that what we were taught about how things petrify and how long it takes, whether you're talking about things in the fossil record or petrified trees, that the official narratives on those are probably very inaccurate.
Yes, yes. I know you've mentioned Jay Dreamer's work and the plasma apocalypse scenario as a way of explaining perhaps what leads to these mass petrifaction or petrification events.
Yeah, that was one of the things that originally got me on the subject. It was a combination of Jay's work, also Mud Fossil University. There was a video by a channel called Wakey Wakey that later got taken down in the big purge. What was that, 2019 or something? And he was that video is called Geology Revived, and he was just looking at some of the cornerstones of mainstream geology and looking at how much actual evidence is there for some of the claims that are being made when it comes to things like the dating of things and how stones come about. It's called petrogenesis, the genesis of stones.
Mhm.
And the mainstream narrative is lacking when it comes to explaining the fantastic myriad of manifestations in the geological world that we see. Because the mainstream thought is that everything is just dying and then compressing, and then it makes these layers over tens and hundreds of millions of years, and then those layers get jostled through tectonic activity, and then the stones like break off into ever smaller and smaller pieces and erode, and then that's pretty much it. And then you've got volcanoes doing their thing. So it was a breath of fresh air to realize that maybe some of the things that I had pondered as a kid and later on when I was in different areas that were just fabulous, geological areas. I got to see a lot of the national parks of the Western United States when I was a kid. And I always just, pondered over how organic and biological everything looked. And later when I went to study chiropractic and I studied tissues and the anatomy of the body, a lot of times I'd be out walking and I'd be like, wow, that looks like it just grew it, and I knew the mainstream narratives from high school and college, and not that I studied geology ever, but I knew the basics, and I was a bit of a science buff and got Popular Mechanics and Science and these different magazines when I was younger, and so I was always kind of trying to keep up on the latest discoveries, and never occurred to me that some of these narratives might fundamentally might be completely wrong. Uh, so that was, yeah, it was an eye opener.
And then you had the courage to go forward and begin putting out your research. I know this is such a contentious area. I imagine you've gotten a lot of knee-jerk reactions from people coming from established perspectives. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the people from the mainstream don't even encounter my work because it's really in kind of the the alternative communities when it comes to different ideas. A lot of people looking into Earth shape. That was kind of how a lot of this began because a friend of mine is Alex Michael, conspiracy music guru, who introduced me to his wacky worldview, and so I set about trying to debunk him for weeks, and kept coming back with thing after thing, and the things that I thought were going to be slam dunks as proof turned out to be Hollywood tricks and manipulations and playing with numbers, and so that got me just looking at Earth shape as a questionable topic, which never occurred to me, and while I suspected that the moon landings might have been faked, I never for a moment believed that maybe they'd been faking everything since, because clearly we've got that ISS that's floating up there and, at 250 miles and, broadcasting live streams from up there. So it just never, so as I started to look into this stuff more and more, I realized, whoa, we've been duped on a whole lot of stuff that it never occurred to me that for a moment that it could be fake. And so then I just realized that it's kind of like I call it the skeleton key of conspiracy theories. It doesn't matter really what the Earth shape is to me or whether we're in a simulacrum or a simulacrum. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but you know, the
Depends on
matrix.
who you ask.
You know, it doesn't really matter to me. I personally, I think we're in some kind of a toroid. You know, we're probably on an accretion disk, and you know, and inside of something. But you know, to me, it didn't really matter what the ultimate shape was if you could prove that we were being lied to about major aspects of our given worldview that we grow up believing. Um, I call it the skeleton key of conspiracy theories, because once you dig in, you know, and open that door and start to look deeper into those things, it starts to be like a house of cards. You realize that everything is propped up by illusion and, you know, mainstream narratives and academia and all of these people who we're taught are the authorities, and you shouldn't question, you know, these kinds of things, because that means you're an absolute idiot. So, you know, that kind of gets back to, you know, what you alluded to before with pushback when it comes to my stuff. I wasn't eager to, you know, I toyed with these ideas for a year before I produced my first video. You know, because like the last thing I wanted to do was be the crazy chiropractor in town who questions the shape of our earth and believes, you know, the mountain in our backyard was once a you know, a titan that lived and later petrified. So these are outlandish ideas to most people, and you know, here I am 4 years later still producing videos on this topic. But what I never really suspected when I began on the whole thing was how much was going to just fall in my lap in confirmation of the stuff that I was looking into. It kind of began just as an intellectual exercise. I like to question things. Even I went to school, I got a bachelor's degree, and then I went back to school and I got a degree in chiropractic. So I spent a lot of my adult life in college, 10 years of school, and, you know, mainstream thought and academia and the scientific method and all of these things. And but I was always a rebel within that system. I was always questioning, and I was always the one that was, you know, kind of the annoying one in class that would always hold up my hand and have an opinion about things instead of just accepting them. So when I started to look into this, I was already aware. I didn't know the word for it, but I was aware of pareidolia, which is, you know, when you recognize a pattern that's not really there. You see something in a cloud, or you see something in knotty pines. You know, there's a face there, but it's not really a face, but it looks a lot like a face, and it's got eyes and a nose, and, you know.
A
So
Rorschach test.
yeah, and I love. I mean, you can see my artwork behind me. It's very abstract, and a lot of people see all kinds of different things in the artwork that I've produced. And I love that. I love to just kind of let the gaze soften and see what I see, and then sometimes I'll turn it 90 degrees, and then you see different things, and you turn it again, and you see other things. So, you know, that's pareidolia, but it's also it's abstract pattern recognition, which is it's a trait of artists, but it's also a trait of visionaries that are able to start to put dots together and make connections that other people haven't, and that leads to amazing discoveries when it isn't squelched by, you know, square thinking.
I love
um,
that. I'm a painter as well, and I have done many paintings that I didn't think about as I was painting them. I literally just let it come out, and then I would turn it and turn it and turn it until I saw something in it. And then I would call it that thing. It became a tree or a mountain or whatever, and it literally emerged from the chaos. Talk about organized chaos. It is an exercise in kind of how things get created around us all the time. They get focalized into something recognizable, but until then, we're just talking about waves of energy.
hmm, yeah. And you know, with regards to the artwork behind me, waves of energy is a perfect way to describe that, because I described it as painting with light. A lot of people think it's painting, but these are actually photographs, and they were taken with movement. So it's like a brushstroke of the camera, and
Oh, that's
so
very
it's, you know, it's like luminescence. You know, the palette was nature, chosen by, you know, whatever area I was in, and then I was the brushstroke, and the 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 sensor of the camera was the canvas. And I started to discover amazing things as I experimented with this, and then later I got into, let's see, that way, mirroring them. And of course, many people are doing this now. 7 years ago, when I was doing art exhibitions and stuff, there was nothing. When you search for abstract photography, there was none of this mirroring stuff where you start to see additional faces, and additional,
Mm.
that line where the mirror happens. There's so much that occurs there, and it's magical, and it's layered, and you can zoom in and you can zoom out, and so that that was a whole other level of discovery for me when it came to the artwork. And then we talked about pareidolia, but there's also apophenia, which is pattern recognition, where you are seeing, like, getting back to my research with the stones and the mountain and everything, where you can fool yourself into thinking there's a pattern there. And unless you actually engage in the scientific method, and you look for repeatability, and you try and do, in science they would do a randomized double-blind trial or something to eliminate all of these different factors of error or influence on the part of the experimenter. So those are all things that I had in mind from the very beginning when I started to look into the mountain. And that was where it got weird, because I just started off initially by looking on Google Earth and tilting. You've got 3D and you can zoom around, and the mountain resembles an elephant, and it's known by many of the locals as the elephant. And so I was just like, after seeing Jay Dreamers and Mud Fossil University talking about his giant dragon in the Sahara devouring a fish, I mean, these are ideas that are just like batshit crazy to most normal people. But what really kind of hit home with me in seeing Jay Dreamer's videos is he was bringing it and tying it in with mythology and religion. And I was always a big lover of this like Joseph Campbell's work, this looking at cross-cultural mythology and comparative mythology, and tying this into historical narratives. But I always thought of that stuff as archetypal. It was metaphors, and it wasn't most of that stuff wasn't literal. So it was really Jay and Mud Fossil University that kind of got me thinking, well, what if our mythology is our real history? Like, they're lying to us about Earth shape and about space and all these other things, then maybe there's more truth to the old stories. You've got things like the Norse mythologies with the world tree and Yggdrasil, which supposedly resides there at the north, and it's this, it's Axis Mundi, it's the center of the world up there, and that's where the gods hang out, and all these things that I just took as mythology. What if that's real, and they were hiding our true history? And the thrust of my channel really for the last 6 months to a year has been focusing a lot on the evidence for the great trees, because I find that is the most conclusive of the evidence that's out there for any of these ideas. If you want to know that the avatar world really existed, you can find out and you can see with your own eyes, and it's just the most astonishing, beautiful thing. So it's been quite a journey over the last several years, because one thing I started to say before is that there have been so many things that have just fallen into my lap of people like, hey, did you know about this? And what about this? And, and then I've discovered things along the way as I'm trying to solve questions that, to empirical evidence that I'd found. Like, I'm finding this and it appears to be this, but how can it be this? Because that goes against the mainstream narrative. And what happened to the rest of the body, in the case of petrified organs and all of these things. The more I started to try and make sense of it, the more things started to line up and dovetail. So it wasn't like I was getting extremely creative in my thinking and bending over backwards to try and make something fit this crazy narrative. It was the other way around. It's just been one thing after another that has come in to confirm these ideas. So that was totally unexpected for me.
I know as an artist and a writer, I've been very inspired by a lot of these concepts, as I imagine writers throughout history have been. I mean, we see this in the Joseph Campbell world of archetypes, and there was a great book that came out a couple decades ago on the writing craft called The Writer's Journey, and it was based on the hero's journey and that kind of thing. So when I was tuning into your channel, and you posted a video of different kinds of mushrooms that could just sort of effervesce, just flower up, out of nowhere. And you were suggesting that this could be what caused something like the Devil's Tower or whatever. So
That was,
I ended up writing this little tiny poem about that I wanted to share with you. It's very, very brief. It's called
oh,
Dream Poem. I found this poem in my dream. It wasn't the potted plant at first seen, but a tremendous act of power, blossoming like the devil's tower, the world tree of trees, a pendulum over hissing seas, turning slowly to striped stone as I wended my way home. And then it goes on from there. But that's the part that was very directly inspired by this imagery from your channel. I thought how
nice.
freaky and amazing that is. Let's do something creative with that. It's hard not to
Yeah,
be very inspired if you're at all creative or at all a dreamer by some of this wild evidence of possible realities that are outside the mainstream.
absolutely. Yeah, that particular video you're mentioning is actually a mirrored video from another channel. It was a
Right.
very small channel. And he reached out to me because I was just toying with the idea because I saw a photograph of Devil's Tower alongside of a particular species of mushroom, and it grows in the exact same fashion. It has a flat top like Devil's Tower. And I was just like, okay, well, that's interesting. And that would also explain the hexagonal fibers. If there, because even in the mainstream narrative, there was megaflora, megafauna, and they talk about mushrooms that grew 12 feet tall and, or even bigger. And we already know that in today's world, the largest living creature in the world is a mushroom in the Pacific Northwest. I think that's what the mainstream agrees on anyway. So, the mushroom, what we call mushroom is actually just the fruiting body of the mycelium. So if
Yes.
we lived in a vapor canopy style world where it was subtropical throughout the entire realm, then mycelium would have stretched from one side of the realm to the other. So
Yes.
to think of gigantic fruiting bodies of mushrooms that could later petrify instantaneously, I don't think that's such a stretch. Scale wise, it's a little bit off when you think about trees that are many miles wide at the diameter, and considering Devil's Tower to be a mushroom, I'm not sure how that would work out with, like, say, the great cedars at 6, 8, 10 miles in diameter, stretching many miles into the sky. But that particular video that I posted, it's a short one. It's only like 8 minutes long or something. And this guy found the most amazing footage, and that's obviously what inspired your poem, because he's got 20 different species of this particular kind of mushroom, and they all grow very, very similar to Devil's Tower, and they do these same twisting fibers, and they have these flat tops. And so he's showing these time-lapsed growth patterns of all of these different varieties of the same family of mushrooms. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. It looks a lot like your Devil's Causeway, or what do you say? Giant's Causeway,
Causeway. Oh,
and
I was going to mention
Devil's
that.
Post Pile, and all these,
I
so
visited I visited the Giant's Causeway when I was in Europe after my junior year. I hitchhiked around Ireland and Northern Ireland for a while and had some wild stories and ended up there marveling at this 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 area, because it's not just the causeway, the whole cliffs around it are similar to that as well. It's a large area where you're getting a lot of this kind of action. You kind of walk along it for a while, and I visited it kind of in a beautiful Irish fog. I mean, it was, and then it opened up when I got to the Causeway. I was so inspired by it. Years later, I wrote a book called Snooze about this guy going into the dream world, and one of his dreams where he has a kind of breakthrough happens there at the Causeway. I had to place that there. It just stayed with me for decades. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was so beautiful, but also so strange. And then we have the mythology around something like that, as we do with so many of these places. There are, the myths and the stories that you get with a lot of these weird anomalous mountains like Mount Go or other places, even Devil's Tower, the Giant's Causeway, which supposedly comes back up over in Britain, was a bridge that was built by a giant, according to the story back
Right.
in the
More
day.
mythology,
More
right? There's no
mythology.
evidence for giants at all.
No, not at all.
None.
Zero, right? And so, and the other thing I wanted to just throw into the conversation is you have this phenomenon where the mainstream, the entertainment industry, seems to be out there constantly looking for what's happening in the alternative world of information and research. And as soon as something starts to bubble up and become popular and people start to pay attention to it, like biogeology, boom, 2022, we get this new Norwegian troll movie, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah. And there
and
was also a new Godzilla versus what was the other one? Godzilla versus King Kong, where they had a whole hollow inner Earth that was, Avatar kind of world. So
oh my goodness, I
yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
That's worth seeing just to see them doing exactly what you're describing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'll definitely check that out. I just watched the second Avatar movie recently, and I don't know if you've seen that one. It's the
yeah,
water version, the water way of water, and then in that one,
yeah.
the great tree is an underwater tree.
Hmm.
Which is
Interesting.
a whole different area of research that is
Right.
probably out there waiting because you talk about these massive organisms, the sea with seaweed and what's going on, as a kind of flowering or fruiting of something larger, like a reef, for example. What the heck is a reef anyway? I mean, it's just, I think some of the same questions apply to a lot of what's going on, under the oceans.
Well, even in Star Wars, like one of the newer Star Wars, they had these mountains that when they zoomed out, you could see that it was a body of someone that was laying down and it was decomposing. There's a classic video by Pink Floyd called Mudmen. It's like a 6 minute long little movie, and it's all about this idea of we're living on Titans. Like, and this was an actual Titan that gets up and moves, and then their whole world, the little tiny people that are living like in the wrinkles of the skin and in the hair and everything of this Titan, their whole world periodically, when this thing moves around, gets, shaken up big time, and they've got to run for cover and hope to survive. And then eventually it settles and they get to like go back to living their normal lives again. It's pretty fascinating. That's just another one of those things that I had never seen and then came across,
Amazing.
along the way. Yeah,
Do
Mudman by
you think
Pink
that's
Pink
on
Floyd.
YouTube?
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah,
Then you
definitely.
have like REM Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, Leaves Me Cold, very, very popular song back in the day. Just the whole idea of standing on the shoulders of giants is related to this topic.
Absolutely. Yeah, and giants, this is I was joking before when I said there's no evidence. I mean, the amount of evidence for giants is monumental. And if you go back to the newspaper clippings from the late 1800s to the early 1900s, before the robber barons took over the publication industry and the healthcare industry, and basically gave us the world we're living in now. They were reporting constantly on gigantic things that were being found, and as they were excavating this, that, or the other, or deep down in mines that were hundreds or even thousands of feet below ground, they're finding civilizations and giant beings. And it sounds like the stuff of fairy tale or fiction, but these are mainstream newspapers that are writing. The writers are speaking very matter of fact and rather eloquently. It doesn't ring like a National Enquirer article at all. And then
And
if
then
you
they
just
had
took if
pictures too, right? There were pictures in many of these publications. So
sometimes, yeah, yeah. There's
bones,
my
that kind of thing.
yeah, my friend Ben, he's got a new channel called The Archivist, Waking Up with Analog, and this is what his primary focus has been. He's been clipping from these digital archives for the last 6 years or 7 years, and he's got something like 8,000 of them uploaded to his Twitter account. And he's just started the YouTube channel about less than 6 months ago, and it's doing really, really well. He's had a couple of amazing interviews with THC recently, the Higher Side Chats, and
Fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he's but the wonderful thing is, like, some of these clippings don't have the date and the time. It's like you can't go reference them, but like I said, they ring true. And yeah, they could be faked in our current world of AI everything. But when you see his work as a whole and you realize that there's a continuity from state to state, and while they're telling these incredibly wild stories about what they were finding and what was going on at the time, and local legends and local history and all this stuff that really doesn't match what we were taught about the old world in North America at all. You start to realize that it's congruent across the states. It's not just like a one-off newspaper that's publishing wacky stuff. And this is what Ben is so great at consolidating and presenting in a way that is easier for people to grasp, that haven't really gotten wise to the possibility that just about everything we were taught is in one way or another a lie or an inversion or a diversion.
I would love to come back to that subject because that opens up into a lot of different avenues. But I did want to ask you what your take is on the phenomenon of these discoveries that you're referencing. I mean, most of these giants are, they're giants, absolutely, but they're not on the scale that you're reporting.
Yeah, yeah, you're talking about 12 to 15 feet, and then
Yeah.
you've got some, 50 footers, 100 footers, in the myths and in some of the documents.
So what I've envisioned, in sort of parsing through some of your work and thinking about other things that I've learned over time, looking at the simulation theory, holographic theory, putting different pieces together, it almost seems like the story or the rollout of biogeology follows a kind of fractal pattern.
Yeah, that's been my take from early on, and that was because when I, first started looking at this, I was pondering, what if it was possible that the stuff that Roger was showing from Mount Fossil University was actually possible or real. And what really gave me pause was that he started referencing ancient Greek texts where they were talking about this great battle between the Leviathan and the Behemoth, and describing the size of these creatures and where this battle was taking place. And it's exactly that part of the Sahara where Roger likes to go in on Google Earth and zoom in on these different parts and talk about the anatomy and everything. And I never just bought it hook, line, and sinker, but I thought it was fascinating that there was some ancient texts that were making reference to that. So then when thinking about the mountain here, we're talking about a fractal level down from that. So from a 1,000-mile long creature to a 3-mile long creature. And then if it were an elephant, a fractal level down from that would be, say, a mammoth, a larger mammoth or something.
Yes, yes.
So the interesting thing about titans of this size, like Mont Go, is that, and I knew nothing about this until later. People are like, you should check into the Book of Enoch, and you hear about in the Bible, they're talking about the angels went to work at the great trees before the flood. The idea, I think, is that when the Creator sent the flood to purge and to clean all of the corruption that was occurring of creation, and the mutations and everything that were brought about, I guess, through the fallen angels. And they mated with the daughters of man and gave rise to the Titans, and then the Titans were destroying everything. And there's lots of different myths. That's just one particular one, but the idea of the Titans, in the Book of Enoch, they actually give a size for them. They said that they were 3,000 ells, which is roughly a mile tall. So that's like exactly what I was finding here. So it was like, whoa, that I didn't even know about that, you know.
I mean,
And it's been that there's been a lot of that kind of thing, and um, you know, when it comes to the great trees, and like I said before, I think the evidence for those is the most compelling of all of this. There's a channel that I'm always referencing nowadays called Hangman1128, who's got hundreds of hours of footage on his channel with really high definition camera, and he's gone up and he's showing that, like, here's a petrified tree, here's a regular tree that's decomposing. This is all the ways that that decomposition manifests. This is how it breaks down. You can see the different component parts. And then he'll pick up a little piece and he'll hold it up. And there in the distance is something that looks identical in every way, shape, and form. But that little piece in his hand, its counterpart is 50 to 100 feet wide. And he's showing this over and over again, and all the different ways in which sap manifests in the trees, and sap manifests in the big trees as petrified sap, which is quartz manifesting in all kinds of different ways. So it's such compelling.
Gold.
What's that?
Relationship between quartz and gold. You've gone into that. That was really
Yeah,
interesting.
that was my last live stream. Yeah, I've done a number of live streams on this topic over the last 6 months, because
Fascinating.
I feel like if people start to wake up to the fact, in my mind, the self-evident fact that these trees were real, and there's a lot of evidence for it. And this goes beyond, like, a lot of people were familiar with the whole no forests on flat Earth thing that came out about 6, 7 years ago, looking at all the mesas and the tree stumps and Devil's Tower, which we already talked about, and hypothesizing that these were once stumps of great trees. And then the question is, well, where did the rest of the tree go? And was there some technology that came? Was it the glittering sword of God? Was it Paul Bunyan? What, you know, why are the mesas just like chopped clean across? You know, and so I thought all of that was fascinating, but I didn't feel like it was conclusive enough that I was going to, like, jump in and start making videos about it. And plus, there were already a bunch of other people that were you know, looking at that stuff. But when Hangman stuff came along, I realized that if people understand that megafauna, and I'm not talking about the megafauna spoken of by geologists and, you know, archaeologists, but megafauna on, you know, an avatar type scale, if that's a real thing, then megafauna isn't such a, you know, reach. You got megaflora, megafauna. You're gonna, if you got one, you probably got the other, you know,
Right,
and that
right.
that just gets into this whole fractal nature of reality, and that ties into, you know, are we in a matrix? Are we in a simulation? You know, or is that just the way the world works? And it, you
Because
know,
the vapor canopy phenomenon, if you had different types of vapor canopies that would have different densities of oxygen and different types of radiation being filtered out, filtered in, whatever, you know, in theory, you could have a kind of descending fractal where your vapor canopies change over time to become slightly less mega and more what we would perceive as normal. But really, what's going on is there's kind of a, you know, we really are standing on the shoulders of giants in a scenario like that, where the world is kind of built up under our feet over these various iterations of the cycles. I'm just saying this is another way of looking at it. If you wanted to say, let's look at this as a real material phenomenon, you know, maybe we have
yes,
some kind
yeah.
of repeating a cycle, a reset cycle that maybe comes after some kind of plasma event. Then we get another type of biosphere that we're exposed to, whether that's inside some kind of disk or who knows. I mean, you know, we could theorize what that would be, or what's even creating the vapor canopy to begin with, or who's doing that. Those are questions that it would perhaps be difficult to answer, but you could see how different atmospheric conditions would be required for the different types of megafauna and flora that we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's a lot of evidence for that in the mainstream scientific narrative, where they've done experiments with pressurized rooms and increased oxygen content, and they get incredible results with just growing tomatoes and plants, and so you get gigantism, and you get much larger fruits, you get much larger quantities of them, and so I think, if there was a time when we had a much higher oxygen concentration, if we were in a more pressurized environment, then gigantism would be a natural result of that. But another thing, thinking of the vapor canopy era is when we think about lifespan, if things are growing longer, most things will grow to meet their environment. If you have a turtle will just keep growing and growing and get bigger and bigger, but if you put it into a smaller confine, it won't grow beyond a certain size. So it might be that in the time of the Titans, the world could sustain a certain number of creatures, and then, through, overpopulation or whatever happened, then it's like, okay, now we need to have a smaller size. And so maybe it's just like we're getting downsized to make more and more room for greater and greater amounts of life. So that ties into the whole fractal thing as well.
It
So there's a
also may
lot.
relate to the lifespans that we see in so many of the myths and scriptures and that kind of thing. I just posted this on my YouTube channel the other day. And I said, "Shades of the vapor canopy, anyone? Man's biological clock set back 10 years after 93 days living under the ocean in a research station," and I'll link to that.
Yeah, I saw that. That was fascinating. Yeah, and that ties into these, what do they call it, hyperbaric chambers or something, where it's
Yes.
like a pressurized environment. Um, and also thinking about lifespan, the Ben, from the archivist who I spoke of before, he's done a couple of streams with Old World Florida, another great channel, and they've been looking at things that have to do with radium and different radioactive materials, uranium, plutonium, radium, and we've both, Ben and I, have been looking a lot at the different materials that these trees were creating. And so some of those materials may have come about as a result of the transmutation process, like when the plasma event happened, or some high heat event through volcanism, something electromagnetic, whatever it was that led to the petrification and led to the destruction of the old, the gigantic world. That may have also led to a transmutation of elements that gives us our radioactive materials. Or it's possible that in that ancient world, those radioactive materials they were there, and they were being created by these beings. Like we have these bioluminescent creatures in the oceans, and we've got bacteria that luminesce when you jostle them. So there's, what Old World Florida has been looking at is a lot of the springs where in Florida, where it's, the fountain of youth is rumored to have been. Florida has the highest concentration of mineral springs in the entire world. And those mineral springs, many of them are rich in things like radium. And so if you go back to the old articles, which is what Ben has been doing, and reading about radium, one of its benefits is longevity and, healing and all of these things. And so this is coming naturally in these springs, but it also leads to gigantism and longer lifespans. So, there's so many things that point to similar conclusions. It's really fascinating. And like I said before, the longer creatures live, the bigger they're going to get. I mean, and even the mainstream narrative is saying, "Oh, we had dragonflies that were a meter long," and they tell us about the dinosaurs, which I think is a load of bull. But dragons is a myth that exists in every society around the world, or most. These serpents, whether they were water serpents or flying serpents or whatever. And they were gigantic as well. So this is all the stuff of myth and fairy tale, but it's like now it's very real and concrete when you start looking at the actual evidence that exists for it. Who would have
I mean,
thought?
the fountain of youth is in my backyard. I'm up in St. Augustine, and
Oh, really? Oh, you
yeah,
live in Florida.
yeah. And so I've
Oh, lucky
actually been
you.
trying to, yeah, well, it's been fun in a lot of ways. I've been trying to get Martin and Cheryl to come up and visit before he takes off back to Cardiff. Martin
Oh,
Liebke,
yeah, Martin Liebke.
because he would be very interested in all the Tartarian architecture in St. Augustine and that sort of thing, but also just
Mm.
things like the springs and whatnot. I was going to say that um, you have like I think it was a couple years ago there was a movie made about the life of Marie Curie, the one who discovered radium, and and then you've got this narrative of the radium girls coming out. But of course, that movie was
Mm.
kind of a hit piece on on radium because it made it look like it was, this
They want us to think it's toxic.
yeah, that's super toxic. And so
Yeah.
like they do everything kind of being turned upside down. I mean, it was a fascinating movie, but in light of this discussion, you wonder, how where the truth is with all of this, or is there, where
And
the
did Mary Curie even exist? Because a lot
yeah,
of people think that she's one of these
exactly.
fictitious characters. You got
Exactly.
Shakespeare and these people who are created to be placeholders for the rollout of different ideas.
Absolutely.
There's a lot about her story that seems a little fishy to me.
Yeah,
But
I've read some of that. The other
mm,
question I had related to trees and transmutation of elements. I mean, we can get into things like the philosopher's stone and transmutation and all kinds of alchemical myths and or information. But one does wonder if trees could take, let's say, a toxic substance, something that might actually be harmful, and by transmuting it and broadcasting it, or putting it out into their very large environments, that they would, if they're huge trees, for example, if they might be able to change the qualities of a toxin, for example, into something that would be healthy.
I
Even
would say
with
absolutely. They're
I mean,
doing this
with
already with
Avatar, you have
mushrooms.
with Avatar, you have unobtainium, right? And it's this,
Right.
this very powerful resource. So it is. What is it? Is it a stone? It's a gem or something like
It
gold?
could very well be radium. They might
Could
just
be
be giving it
radium.
a
But
different
you can see
name.
it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
glowing.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. And is that what is happening in these biosystems in Avatar when everything is glowing and all the creatures are glowing? They're all bioluminescent. The people are bioluminescent. And
Yeah.
so I'm just wondering about that. I was also wondering about the relationship between this potential phenomenon and something like the Russian research on torsion energy that's been done with pyramids, and showing that these pyramids create all kinds of weird bioeffects, growing healthy gardens around them, creating more peaceful environments around them, less illness. Also, doing these weird atavistic things where the research has shown that that in the vicinity of pyramids, flowers and trees and other types of plants that are supposedly extinct show back up. That's a very fascinating phenomenon.
Mm.
And I wanted to, while on the subject of pyramids, I just wanted to throw this out. I think it's kind of interesting in the on the subject of pyramids and titans and stones and that kind of thing, that you have Enoch called the chief cornerstone.
Mm. Yeah. Well, just to go back to what you were saying about the trees transmuting things like, toxic radioactivity, that kind of thing is already well established currently with the mycelial network. So that it's well accepted that toxic waste, plastics, and I think I don't know, the whole narrative when it comes to nuclear power and Fukushima and Chernobyl and nuclear bombs and all that, that's also another one that's a deep rabbit hole. So
Agreed.
does radiation exist? And if it does, what, how, I mean, obviously radiation exists, but, is it like what they're telling us? I mean, Chernobyl is a thriving ecosystem. And when I was a kid growing up, I remember them talking about nuclear winters, and that if there was a meltdown or bombs were dropped, that there would be so much radiation there that nothing would grow for potentially thousands of years, right? That
Right.
was that was
Me
that
too.
was the narrative when I
That's
was a
the
kid in
narrative.
school.
Sure.
And so yet you've got Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and shortly after those bombs went off, people were already moving back in, and those are both thriving cities now. And I don't think World War II happened thousands of years ago. So that narrative was total bullshit. And, when I was a kid,
Right. Right.
they were talking about global cooling. You know, if we don't change things fast, we're going to go the way of the woolly mammoth because we're going to get another ice age. That was the narrative when I was in my teens, you know, and now it's like, oh, global warming. And then they stopped with the global warming because, you know, things weren't getting warm enough and we were having some of the coldest winters ever. So they just went to climate change because it's the vaguest thing you could ever possibly talk about. And it can, well, it's always changing, so they can never be wrong, right? It's kind of like the war on terror. So you know, you've got this invisible boogeyman that they can always just move the goalposts in any direction they want to. So when it comes to the radiation and you know, Fukushima, I remember seeing these fear porn clouds of, you know, the radioactive photography, or you know, it was this plume that was moving across the Pacific, and they were saying it was going to kill all the wildlife in the Pacific, and we were doomed. And you know, and it's like, you know, last I checked, not everyone in Japan is dead, and they're right next to Fukushima. But anyway, going back to the mushroom thing, that you know, there's a lot to suggest that you know, I think anything can be transmuted, and biologically, you've got transmutation through high energy, like you know, heat or plasma. That's just a fact, and I could cite some examples of that.
Or like chicken
Um,
eggs with calcium.
yeah, yeah, I've mentioned that in several of my streams, and that ties into this, you know, this whole idea that a chicken is eating mica, which has the building blocks of calcium, right? But it's not, if you look at how much calcium is in the eggshell, it's more than the chicken is consuming each day. So it's gotta get that calcium from somewhere, and it also needs calcium for its own bones. So, you know, what's happening? Well, clearly it's taking these other materials and it's creating calcium, and we're told that that's not possible in the periodic table with you know, the mainstream elements are born in the heart of stars and then they supernova out, and we have limited quantities of them, and you know, and then they coalesce in different places, and that's why certain planets have this and other planets have that, you know, and that's that whole, you know, space narrative. And then we've got a geological narrative of, you know, the Earth is 4.6 billion years and the universe is 16.4 billion years, and all these things that they just tell us, oh, these are just facts, you know, but they don't tell you about biological transmutation, or the fact that you can take a tree and put it in a pot and measure how much soil is there and weigh the tree and then put it in a room and only give it distilled water and sunlight for years, and the tree is going to grow and take on mass. So all it's getting is light and water that has no mineral content in it whatsoever, and yet it grows and takes on mass. So where is that stuff coming from? Clearly the tree is transmutating the sunlight and the water and creating other elements. So
I mean,
I
hydroponics in general.
I didn't know about any of this stuff until the last 4 or 5 years. You know, it's just like bought mainstream narratives on everything, and now you find out they're very concrete scientific experiments to show that fundamental parts of the world that we, you know, we've been given, or the world story that we've been given, are just bull.
Right, right. I mean, given the absolute um, omnipresence of these ancient trees or stumps or whatever we're encountering all over the place in this world that would have been largely made up of trees, it seems like to me. And then things like Avatar, where the trees are seats of consciousness. And then you look at the Druids, you look at shamanism, where trees are absolutely sentient beings, actually rather related to us in many ways, and with an affinity for people. Do you think there's any truth to this idea that trees were somehow massive beings of consciousness, that they were worshipped, that
Oh, undoubtedly, still are. I mean, the original internet, right? The mycelial network works in conjunction with the trees and their root structures, and all of the plants are all interacting. And there's a wonderful book I read called The Secret Life of Trees. I can't remember who, I think it was a German author, but it's been translated. And you know, it's talking about the complexity about how trees communicate, and it's an utter mind blow, that book. And you know, they can, like, if an animal is, they'll allow animals to consume a certain amount of them, but if a herd of animals is over consuming to the point where it's going to lead to the destruction of the tree or several trees, they can signal to other trees like downwind, hey, these guys are taking more than their fair share, and those trees can start to produce in their leaves a toxic substance that will actually start to kill off some of the herd to save the trees. I mean, it's just like,
Wow, that's
it's nuts. You know,
that's
there's so,
amazing.
that book is filled with wild revelations.
This
So
is the Daniel Carabut, The Secret Life of Trees, exploring their communication, cooperation, and significance.
I don't recall the author's name, but that sounds like the right one. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
well, and then there's another one, but that's not a German sounding name at all. There's several.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong about the German
There's
part, but
another one
secret.
called The Hidden Life of Trees, What They Feel, How They Communicate, Discoveries from a Secret World. That was another book that
Mm,
was got a lot of reviews. So there's several books on this subject. Maybe they're covering some similar territory.
possibly, yeah. But you know, and the mycelial network, you know, going back to Avatar, there was a scene that that Cameron originally wanted to put in, and that they never finished it and they didn't put it in. But basically, it was a shamanistic ritual where he was the main character was consuming something akin to ayahuasca, and you know they had this massive, you know, event with Awa, you know, the
Yeah,
mother tree, and you know, all these visions, and it, you know, I think I think that there's definitely way more to. I mean, nature is so powerful that they have to do everything they can to suppress it to keep it from just thriving. I think that's the natural state is bounty and you know plenty, but we're given manufactured scarcity.
Yeah, I agree totally. That's the term I would use too. So let's talk just a little bit about why why the psyop? Why this big psyop in your estimation across so many areas? Why is everything inverted, false, or even if it's somewhat true, it's almost never the entire story? What's going on? Is this a coordinated effort? Is this part of just something that we can't understand? Are there bad guys? Are there, are we talking about nefarious forces, deep state, Illuminati? Are we talking about something like a simulation? What's going on here? Because I think people, this is,
Yes.
I think this is one of the, that's good. My position, this is the driving question for a lot of people getting on YouTube and doing channels, whether they know it or not. This is actually the root question. It's what the hell is going on to create this fuckery in the world?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's you've got I don't know, several things came to mind when you're saying that. The first one is if they can get you asking the wrong questions, it doesn't matter what your answers are.
That's
So,
that's
you
really
know,
that's so good.
yeah,
Can I
tying that
borrow that
in,
for an Errant Fest t-shirt?
it's sure. Yeah,
I'm gonna write it down.
it's not my line, but you're welcome to use it as much as you like.
Who said that?
I don't know, but I think it's great. And you know, I think you know, a lot of us are something I did coin. I don't know if I was the first in the world, but I looked online, I couldn't find it. But this concept of paradigm blindness, and that's, you know,
Mhm.
feed us a false paradigm, and then we go around believing that paradigm. And then again, if they can get you asking the wrong questions, it doesn't matter what your answers are. So we end up like palpating the elephant, and we're like, it's a rope, you know, as you pull on the tail, and it's a tree stump, you know, and it's, you know, it's all these things, but you don't ever get the big picture because everything is compartmentalized. It's all, you know, pyramidal structure of control where, you know, you've got all these people who are specialists in their field, but they can't branch out of the field because they don't want to step on other academics' toes or say something wrong and be made a fool of. So, you know, that's the paradigm blindness is a very big thing. And you know, the question is to why. One of the things that, you know, why lie about the big trees? I mean, this is such an amazing part of our past. Like, well, that teaches us that major parts of our mythology and maybe our world books, you know, the stories like the stuff in the Bible and the flood, the great flood myths and all these things, all of a sudden those start to take on more of a significance and a meaning. And when I was a kid, I could care less about the past. Digging in the dirt to look at like some rocky structure that existed hundreds or thousands of years ago. That was the most boring thing I could think of. Why would I want to do that when we could take a rocket out into space and we could explore nebulas? And you know, I was a big Star Trek, Star Wars junkie. So, you know, if they can just get you to believe all this stuff, then your focus is up there, you know, and it's the same thing like when you're talking about this Earth-shaped debate, like, you know, if you start looking at the empirical evidence down here and we see too far and gas pressure can't exist next to a vacuum with, you know, without a barrier and all these fundamental things that are very scientific, you know, based, you know, if you just got everyone looking up at the stars and into the moon and going, well, the moon is round and the sun is round, and so those are balls, so we must be on a ball, you know, and they don't realize that, well, you look at the stars with this P900 or P1000 camera, they look very different from what we're told. They're like cymatic utterances that are vibrating in what appears to be a liquid, you know, a liquid medium.
Yes.
So, and they're showing concentric circles and in all of these you know fractal-like patterns. So
their paintings.
Yeah,
Their photos.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You know, and so you know, when I was a kid, I was just all out there, you know, in the future, and I could care less about the past. Now I'm a typical old graying fogey. It's like, man, if things were better in the past, let's go back to the old days, you know. It's like,
right.
You know, but for good reason, because, you know, when you look down, I mean, just something like architecture, the further down you go, the more impressive it all gets. It should be the opposite. The further down you go, the more primitive it should be. But instead, we get cyclopean, you know, megalithic architecture way down below. So you got to pull away all the mud flood stuff, and then you got to dig down and go into the tunnel systems. And, you know, there's just like, it's crazy the stuff that's being discovered all over the world right now, that all of it just destroys the mainstream narrative if you just think about it rationally and you realize that they couldn't have possibly pulled off this stuff, you know, the way we're told in the time frame we were told that it happened, you know, just so
I guess the
you
question,
know, I mean, we grew up like
why,
north.
what's going on? You know, you've got Jason who likes to theorize that there's some kind of benefactor force. A lot of times he connects this with Enoch or Enki, but there's something like for example, with the Mandela effect, where
Let's come to both of those real quick. I just want to finish before I forget, because
yeah,
this
sure.
is tied to exactly what you're asking. You know, one, I think it's spiritual warfare. Ultimately, I think that the people who are in control, they may not even be human, you know, or they may be possessed, or they may, you know, whatever it is, they're clearly psychopaths. They don't operate the same way we do. They're all about, you know, control and gain. They're not operating with empathy. They're not to save the world and make it a better place. So that's one aspect of it. And then there's the sheer profit motive. And profit is a weird one because they control the money system. So money is irrelevant to them. That's just a tool of control for them, obviously. But when it comes to something like resources, and, you know, whether we have limited or unlimited resources, that's debatable. But if you think about the trees, what would be the point of lying about the big trees? Like, that's kind of, well, it doesn't really work with the size of the ball they tell us we're on, and the time frame and how old things were and stuff like that. But it's also, you know, what are they mining? You know, so much of the world is controlled by resources and what they can pull out of the earth, right? It's needed for our electronics, and we need this particular element to be able to make this thing, and it's very rare and it's very expensive. And well, if you know that the trees existed and their root structures and certain species of tree were known to be rich in this particular element, you know, then you're going to have a huge advantage over everybody else in finding the raw materials that you're looking for. So I think there's this is where, you know, somebody who's, you know, knows this stuff and owns major mining companies, they're going to have a major financial advantage over somebody that's like, thinks that everything died and got layered down over hundreds of millions of years and then got bumped up by tectonic activity. You know, they're going to be like, they might randomly hit something once in a while and hit it, you know, and make a score, but they're not going to be just like, this is where we need to go right there. That's where we're going to find what we're looking for, you know. So
Right.
that I think that's a big aspect of it is and also I keep talking about the trees, but if Titans were real also, we're bioaccumulators. We're creating all of these tissues as we grow each and every tissue is different, in its composition from all of the other tissues, and there's going to be different elements that are going to be found, and if you know where to go to find those, you know you're going to find the lodestone or the Ben stone or whatever, these materials
Right.
that are mythically sought after, the unobtainium and radium and all this stuff. So I think that's one of, but ultimately I think it gets back to control of the mind, control of consciousness, and that now we can talk about the benefactor and the simulacrum and stuff like that.
Well, it's just a theory. I mean, it's this idea that there's something trying to wake us up, because it's easy. It's easy in the truther community to go to the negative, to go to the predatorial, to assume that, we're just everything we're seeing is the result of psychopaths and evil forces. And yet there are some strange things going on, like the Mandela effect, and like this explosion of truth emerging everywhere, left, right, and center, as if possibly someone is trying to wake us up, wake the flock up.
Yeah.
It's at least possible that we are being given, massive amounts of data to shake us out of our hypnosis.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, if you look into Hollywood, it's only been the last 5, 6, 7 years that I've been aware of how deeply occultic Hollywood is, and how literally everything that comes out of there, it has multiple layers of meaning, and symbology is woven throughout it all. And a lot of these seminal classics, like The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, and these stories, the you know they're deeply esoteric, and a lot of it is coming straight out of the influence of theosophy in Hollywood, and so there is definitely an effort to wake people up, and it may be that you've got the good wizards and the bad wizards, and the bad wizards kind of have control of the realm right now for the most part, so the good wizards have to operate in a more subtle fashion, and they're keeping the light alive, so to speak.
Right, right.
But they're trickle feeding us, information that allows us to slowly wake up and become less and less controlled. This whole concept of the matrix, the simulacrum. I think Jason mispronounces it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and
But you get stuck on that.
he's the one I
Now
learned the
it's
word
his
from. So
trademark. So,
yeah.
typically it's
But
simulacrum or sometimes simulacrum, but Jason has an endearing way of saying it.
yeah. Well, when I came out of The Matrix, I saw it in Berkeley of all places, like when it was in the movie theater the first time around. And I came out of that and it was just like reality was different. You went in, it was one way, you came out, it was another way. And all of a sudden you're just looking around going, you know,
Yeah.
are we in that? And to me, this, ties in deeply with the whole concept of synchronicity. And you mentioned the Mandela effect, which is this kind of idea that it can be changed. And, some of those Mandela effects are, if you go out and ask 100 random people on the street of the same age group about something that's directly related to something that they would have gone through in their childhood, they're 100 out of 100 practically is going to give you the previous answer, not the current one, and that includes the Bible, that includes different lines from movies and different products. And so there's definitely altering that's happening to our collective reality, consensus reality. But I've had a different thought about it, because either it's all just a simulation, and it's a big game, and we're in avatars and we've agreed to come here, or maybe we're being punished, and this is a place we come to learn lessons so that we can be able to deal with the power that we have as beings. There are all these different ways to look at it, but when I started looking at the mountain and started looking at the stones, my general understanding is that I see the matrix as an overlay that exists on creation. So you have a created reality that came from God, whatever you want to call God. And how old that is, I don't know, whatever. But then on top of that, you have your maritime law, and you have your the Federal Reserve, and you have the school books and all the narratives that we're fed that are false, and you have the TV, and you have all the stuff that the internet and all these things that are tools for us to wake up, but for the vast majority of people, they're tools that are being used to keep them asleep. And that's what I see as the matrix. And I've when I go out and I see a flower and I see a bird, and a bird lands nearby, and I can watch it interact with its environment. To me, that's real, and I just marvel at the beauty of this creation. I think it's an incredible, wonderful place, but there's all of this stuff that's not great, and a lot of that has to do with all the ways in which this natural flow and a natural plan is being subverted. So
Mhm.
that I see it more like an overlay on top of a real reality. But
How does that relate to the concept of an accretion disk, like you mentioned earlier, because if you do the biogeology thing and you take it down far enough, unless we're talking about infinite time, you hit something that's not biogeology.
yeah, well, I think that ultimately, when you look at an atom or a cell or an organ or a planet, not in the NASA sense of the word, but where we are, I have no problem with the idea that there may be other places that are like this but different, or that it may be nestled, and that we might be inside of some great being, and this is this oscillating vortexual thing that we call the Earth is actually a living, breathing thing that, like when you look at the stars and you see these cymatic
Mm.
energetic emanations, we might just be in a big version of one of those. And there's no reason in my mind that couldn't be nestled in a tissue of some larger, a heart that's beating, for example.
Sure.
Um, there was a turn of the century astrologer named Dane Rudyard, and in one of the books I read by him, he described reality as a hierarchical series of interpenetrating holes, WHOLE. So a hole would be an atom, a hole would be a cell, a hole would be an organ, a hole would be a being, a hole would be a culture, a hole would be the world itself. And it's a hierarchical series of interpenetrating holes. So all of these holes are interacting with each other and they're embedded within each other, and this, to me, it's a beautiful way of just kind of conceptualizing the complexity of reality and what we're in.
Yeah, there was even a concept that came out of a lot of classical thinking back in the, growing out of the Greek philosophical system, but kind of flowering in England, for example, in the time of Pope and Swift and the 18th century, that sort of thing, about having to do with the plenum, Plenum, and it was this idea of all things that exist within this whatever this is, the world, the universe.
Mm,
So
yeah.
the idea would be that at some point in time you kind of max out a given space, and that maybe there are other worlds that would exist adjacent to that, interlocking with that, superimposed on that, whatever, but that infinity doesn't just necessarily keep going without discrete breaks that would be possibly fractal or some other structure that allows them to interface.
Yeah, everything seems to oscillate. I mean, if you look at sound waves and you look at the Fibonacci sequence, the spiraling in, the spiraling out, centrifugal force. Are you familiar with the Martin Kenny stuff with the cosmic egg? He was
Yes.
talking about these, like that the Earth may actually go through these these growth cycles. And just like the rings of a tree, like if we're in, think of Yggdrasil once again, you know, this central tree that existed in the north. Got our aurora borealis up there. We've got the compasses point there, and periodically there may be, you know, and this may be what the plasma event is that this is like some kind of a major birthing trauma as things expand and go outward, and you know, and that may also explain this fractal quality as well. That further out it gets, the bigger things get, and closer to the center, it's more concentrated and closer to source. And you know, it's fun to ponder all this stuff, and it makes you want to like try and hop on a boat and go and see what's up there.
Yeah, it really does. Fun. I
Yeah.
like you know, I like looking at things from a philosophical perspective. It's more my wheelhouse. I just enjoy it more. I did want to ask you, when you talk about concentric circles and oscillations, cymatics, that sort of thing, what do you make of tree rings? How do you interpret what tree rings are?
I don't know. I mean, I think the different colors, you know, are directly related to the seasons and, you know, the kind of the outer forces interacting or acting upon the tree. Um, but beyond that, I couldn't tell you.
It's interesting because I was having a conversation with Square Peg Divergent about isometrics and trying to figure out what's going on in the timeline and using the past to predict the future. And uh, you know, this is something that Jason had been pioneering, and he was looking at this almost like you drop a stone in water, and you have the wave dispersion that happens going forward and backward in time, right? So you look back, let's say, at an event that happened. Uh, you know, you take a central date, a nodal point, 1975, for example, and you want to see what's going on, then you would look at 1950, and then you would look at the year 2000, and those would be kind of equidistant dates.
Yeah, what does he call that? Isometric something or other, right?
Isometric projection, that's what he was calling it. And
Yeah.
then Square Peg and I got in this discussion about, well, what if it's not really like, you know, waves, the action? What if it's more like somehow in some capacity more organic and more like tree ring that we're looking at, that time is actually functioning something like in some way that is more like a tree. And
Yeah, well, if you think about the toroid and the
yeah,
tree, you know, starting with, you know, it starts as a sapling and it's got roots going down and it's got
yeah,
its leaves going up, and then it's going to slowly expand outward. Well, if you took a cross section of the tree, that would be the accretion disc, right? So that
yeah,
would be
yes.
slowly expanding outward. Um, and that's like ripples on a pond. So you drop a rock in, and those ripples are spreading outward, and they get bigger and bigger as they go further and further out, and they go in opposite directions. Um,
And that's the wave diffusion that's happening as the rings spread out over time, like the ripples would get farther and farther apart.
Also, yeah, yeah, and that, I mean, this ties in a little bit to what I do as a chiropractor. You know, when I'm adjusting people, that sound, that popping sound, when you know the joints pop, that's called a cavitation.
Yes.
And that happens when the joint fluid, when there's a separation of the bones on because of tension, what it does is it creates a vacuum in the joint fluid. And so there's diffused gases that exist throughout the fluid, but because of the suction, those gases coalesce into a bubble. And then at a certain point, which is called the paraphysiological space, where you move beyond that space, that's when the popping happens. Well, what the popping is an implosion of the bubble. And at that moment that it implodes, it gives off light as well. So that's that cracking sound is an actual implosion of the bubble. A lot of people think that's bone on bone, or that's not what's happening at all. What's actually happening is that these bubbles are expanding and then collapsing. And that is sonoluminescence. If you've seen the whole star in a jar thing, that's exactly what they're doing with sound. They're hitting a spherical jar of fluid, and they're hitting it with sound frequencies from different directions and getting the frequencies right. And it's causing these little bubbles to expand and collapse and explode, expand or implode. And that's happening like thousands of times a second. And that's creating what they call a star in a jar, and it looks identical to what you're seeing when you're looking up into the heavens with the powerful non-NASA telescopes. You know, when you've got the P1000, you look up there, it looks exactly like that's what's happening. And it's a sight to me, I think I just see the stars as like cymatic utterances of the Godhead. But going back to the cavitation thing, there's a lot of theories about something called solitonic transmission, which, you know, there are theories about the fascial network in the body that it's this fatty crystalline, liquid crystalline network that literally goes from the head to the toe, and it's in every single tissue in the body at every level, you know, going permeating the entire tissue. And so some are suggesting that this is a communication network that is either working in conjunction with or at a higher level than the nervous system itself. And that operates through solitonic transmission. So when there's some kind of a pull on the fascia, it sends things in both directions outward. You know, it's like, I don't know, I guess some people would call it pressure mediation or something, where it's like it's going out, and it's such fascinating subject because it's one of the things that they're using to explain how we can do things that we shouldn't be able to do based on the speed of how fast the nervous system transmits.
Yes.
You
I
know,
mean, all the fascia stuff with like myofascial work, for example, really, really interesting. And sort of the fascia is piezoelectric. And then you get into, I mean, I just did an interview with Being Human podcast a few days ago, or maybe it's more like a week ago, just get published 2 or 3 days ago. And we got into the subject of sound holograms. You have the work of Peter Gurayev and wave genetics, and some wonderful writing done by physicist Richard Allen Miller on his work. And they're looking at the whole genetic apparatus as a solitonic lattice that is this communication network. I mean, and then of course that would interface with the fascia and with the rest of the physiology, and that would contribute to what we see as the toroid energy that ultimately is given birth from the heart area, and sort of that pumping action of the heart and the toroid energy field, the electromagnetic energy field that we see. So, I mean, this is such a map.
Did you get into any of my videos on the subject of the heart, not just the heart stones, but the works of Francisco Torrent Guasp and the helical heart? Are you familiar with that?
I did not, but I was already familiar with his work. And when you started talking about him, I was completely on the same page. And this idea that the heart just is kind of this you can just kind of roll out the heart, you know.
Yeah, I've got for people who don't know anything about him, I've got a 1 minute video that's just like I made it for TikTok. It packs a lot of information into 1 minute, but it says the heart is not what you think is the title. And you know, like Rudolf Steiner, he had a lot to say about the heart and circulation, and our whole model when it comes to how the heart works, that it's, you know, contracting and pumping blood out to 70 trillion cells. That whole model fails very, very quickly when you just look at it from a common sense perspective, that you have blood with high viscosity that's going to ever narrowing tubes.
Oh, it's great.
And on one contraction, that's supposed to push all this blood out to all of the cells, and then it's just going to passively fill, you know, and then pumped out again. So this is what Francisco Torrent Guasp, a Spanish cardiologist, he found fault with this theory even when he was in school studying cardiology, and he dissected thousands of hearts, and it took him a long, long time, but eventually he discovered this, what's called the myocardial ventricular band, which is this idea that if you know how to do it, you can actually dissect a heart bluntly with your fingers without even using a scalpel, and the thing literally unrolls into one long band. And so the electrical impulse is going from one end to the other, but because of the nature of how the heart is constructed and rolled up, they call it the Gordian knot, because you get all these fibers going in different directions. That leads to these dual, you know, spiraling vortexes that go in opposite directions. And the heart is literally an energetic singularity that's it's like a perpetual motion machine from the time we're born until the time we die. And he proved it anatomically, and then later proved the toroidal flow of blood as well. So most people have never even heard of him. He should have won the Nobel Prize, and he died about 15 years ago.
Now he's the guy who lived just across the mountain from you. Isn't that true? And
Yeah,
so
that
you're
was such a
finding like these heart
mind-blowing.
stones.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
seeing all these correlations between these rocks you're finding and some of his data and other data related to heart
it was
physiology. And then
it
he's
was
like
like I still look,
miles
I've
away.
got goosebumps just thinking about it still now after all this time because yeah, I started I was looking at the whole mud fossil thing and I was looking at the rocks and I'm like, yeah, they do look biological, but I was frustrated with the fact that nobody was really, I mean, Roger had his 3 DNA analyses, that you could find on his website and download if you wanted to look at them and see, well, yeah, they're real lab reports with real numbers. So, you know, but I was always frustrated because it was always people who were talking about the stuff, they were pointing at these really nondescript things that were like, yeah, it could be that, but it could also be this and it could be something else. And so that was frustrating for me. So I just kind of put out to the universe, to God, if this is real, send me something undeniable. I want I want something that. And 3 days later, I was walking a river bottom with my girlfriend, and I looked down and I saw this rock. I'm like, wow, that's unusual. It looks different from all the other ones. And I picked it up, and after about 2 minutes, I realized this is a heart. How this isn't possible. And even in the mud fossil theory, that wasn't possible because why would the heart be completely separate from the rest of the body? It didn't make sense to me. But I was looking at it, and right off the bat, I found like 6, 8 different anatomical correlations, and there I could see that there were chambers, and there was like a valve structure, and the more I looked at them, so I carried this heavy thing back and started looking. I pulled out. I've got 2 great anatomy books here from school, and I pulled out the chapter on the heart, and I started looking at it, and that first day I had like 12 to 15 different anatomical features. Later, I went and I got endoscopic camera so I could go into it. I got a microscope after, further on, and it was just like, and it just opened up this whole thing that I had never even considered as a possibility. And that gets back to the whole scientific method, where I was just like, okay, I'm not going to do a whole pareidolia thing with the rocks here. So if there's anything to this, I should be able to find more, right? If this is a real phenomenon. So I went out to the river bottom and, that second time. So I made 2 videos, one called Mud Fossil, the Heart of the Matter. That's when I go in with the endoscopic camera and I show side by side, this is the anatomy, this is the rock, and then I rotate it. Here's the, so, and then I went out with the just filming. And I found another, like in about 15 minutes, I found another dozen rocks that had a very similar configuration to them. And it wasn't the kind of thing you would expect from just like rolling around in a river bottom and banging against other rocks. These were very specific shapes that I was finding. And they had indentations at the top where the valves would have been. And so that began this whole journey. And I didn't know anything about the helical heart. I didn't know about Guasp and his discoveries. And it wasn't until I'd already made a bunch of videos on the subject, and I had another video called Petrified Organs, Giants' Hearts, and How to Spot Them. I had one called Broken Hearts Tell Tales. I did another one where I went out live, a little Heartstone field work, and I literally like took the camera. There's another one. There's another one, and I'm picking them up and I'm showing them, rotating them. You can see the pattern is reoccurring. That shouldn't be happening based on what we're told. If it was a particular kind of rock that was just breaking off and eroding in that way, you shouldn't have the scalability. You shouldn't have different colors of them. There were all kinds of things that were just like more and more lining up with this is a real pattern. And I've found a whole bunch of other things since then. But it was Guasp's work that someone in my comment section turned me on to. They're like, the heart is a rope. And I was like, okay, whatever, dude. Hard as a rope. Never heard that before. And then And
That's
then a little while later, someone else was like, the heart is a rope, check out the helical heart. And I was like, the helical heart? I've never even heard of that, helix, vortex, and so I pulled up this documentary on GWAS, and I was watching it, and he was, I saw the heart, and then when he rolled it up, there's this point where the fibers meet. So you got fibers going this way and fibers going this way, and they meet, and those are called sulcus lines, right?
it's like a
Well,
rose folding on itself almost.
it's like a knot. It's literally like a rope, that's been knotted up. The heart was referred to as the Gordian knot for many years, because nobody could really unravel its secrets until GWASP came along, and Alexander the Great came along and just sliced through it with a big sword. That was the story when it came to the Gordian knot. And the one who can solve the Gordian knot will be the Emperor of Persia or something like that. And so he doesn't bother to solve it. He just slices through it. And I thought, oh, that's a good metaphor for mainstream science and their approach to,
Yes.
to medicine, as opposed to really unraveling it and figuring out how it works, which is what GWASP did. So I I was watching that video, and when he rolled the heart back up and I saw these meeting points, my jaw hit the floor, because I realized that, at that point, I already had 100 stones that I'd brought back that were like matching this pattern. I'm like, there's no way. How can this not be described in the geological record? Nobody's ever talked about this phenomenon. This is going way beyond random chance or cherry picking, because the specificity of the repeatable findings is like there's a pattern here, and I'm not a geologist, so who am I to be coming up with this kind of a discovery? But then when I started making videos about it, people started sending me photographs and videos of them, like with even better specimens than what I was finding here in Spain, with like still red, still like looking bloody. And so that was when I went out and I started breaking them open and finding that they have chambers in them, and some of them are red inside. I was like, what the hell? We're told these are clay clumps that have just like been compressed in sedimentary layering to the point where they start to become metamorphic rock because of the heat and the pressure. And so it starts to melt into a much harder rock than the surrounding clay. And that is how these rocks are supposed to come about. And then they just pop out and they bump into each other and they get eroded by the wind and water. And that's how we get these reoccurring forms. And I'm like, that makes no sense whatsoever to what I'm finding. And so then watching that video with GWAS, I realized that a bunch of the rocks that I had seen had these curved lines in them, exactly where these fibers were meeting. So I paused the video and I went and started to look at these rocks. And sure enough, a bunch of the ones I'd already brought home had the curved lines exactly where they were supposed to be. And then learning about the helical heart, I didn't know this either from school. I was just like, it's a 4-chamber pump. Here, 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 right? That's not what it's doing. It's a spiral vortexing contraction. And if you film the heart, they open up chests and there's videos of the hearts, and you can see from the bottom, it's contracting like this. It's a vortexual spiral contraction. And so that was another and then I went and looked at the rocks again. And a lot of the best specimens that I have, when you looked at them from the bottom, it was like a propeller twist. It was, they literally petrified in that position.
Yeah,
so how much specificity?
Twisting, right? That little bottom tip.
Yeah. So you've got indentations or openings for the aorta and the vena cava on top. You've got this harp shape, heart.
Yeah.
Earth is an anagram of heart.
Yeah.
Heart, they're all, and then you've got the sulcus lines. Sometimes you've got the coronary artery, which is there. It goes across. It was one thing after another, and then for me, the slam dunk was this spiral at the bottom. Because explain to me how that happens through random erosion in the river bottom, right?
It makes no sense.
Yeah. So then, that was such an eye opener for me. And then one day I was watching that video again, the helical heart video, and I saw that Francisco Torrent GWAS, it said Denia, Spain, which is literally 10 minutes from me. I was there today.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? And I didn't know he was dead at that point. I was like, or no, I probably did because they talked about, that he had passed away. But I, I, I went looking online and there was a foundation for, the GWASP Foundation. And I'm like, no way. So one day I got up the nerve after I'd been doing, a lot of videos and studying this to call the foundation, because my hope was that even though he was no longer alive, that maybe there was some cardiologist, because he suffered major backlash from the cardiology community. He was ridiculed by his contemporaries. It took them 25 years before they woke up to what he discovered and proved unequivocally. They proved it with positronic emission. They proved it with they took a cow heart and they blew it up with gas while doing CAT scans. So you're getting slices of X-rays, and so they're expanding it, and they're taking X-rays as it expands and as it contracts, and you can see the dual vortexing of the fibers, not just the flow of the blood through it, but the heart muscle fibers themselves are also doing that as they contract. So, I mean, this is just and cardiologists don't know this, right? There's loads of medical doctors don't have a clue about the true nature of the heart. And so imagine people trying to do heart,
right?
yeah. Oh, they're doing heart surgery and they don't even know how the freaking thing works, It's just nuts. So I called up.
Thought.
What's that?
That's a little
Yeah.
food for thought.
Yeah, definitely. So I called up the foundation one day, and Gwasp's wife answered, and I told her, I'm a huge fan of your husband's work, and I've just wondered if you might know a cardiologist that I could contact, because I've made a discovery that's not exactly related, but it's indirectly related, and I wanted to get the opinions of a cardiologist, because I could care less what the geologists say about these stones, because in fact, I have a video called Paradigm Crushed, which is a 3-hour video of the telling of the tale of being contacted by people who wanted me to send rocks off to a laboratory in the US, which I did. And the reason that it's 3 hours long is because 90 minutes of that is telephone conversations. And so I have to go through visually to show everything that's being spoken about in those conversations. Then I show their conclusions, and then, point by point, I show why they were erroneous, why they were completely hand-wave dismissing my findings, why they didn't address the actual phenomenon, why they just towed the line on the mainstream narrative in every way, shape, and form, and actually were disingenuous and went out of their way to try and misrepresent what I was presenting. And so that's a really interesting video and worth watching if someone has the time. It's a good.
Your whole channel, people should just start at the beginning and just watch your channel, because it's kind of
if you want to see the evolution of what's happened, yeah, watch them in reverse order, because you'll see how my first video is still to this day the most watched video, because it's the first of the Unveiling of Titan series. So the first video was an overview. It's my weakest video that I've ever done. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I would remove from that video, that I wouldn't have put in. I would have worded things differently. But part 2 through 6, it's all about the eye of Montgo. The third one is about the ear. The fourth one is about the tissues of Montgo, examined from a histological perspective, which is histology is the study of tissue. So I started looking at, well, bone. What is the construction of bone? What are the components of bone? How does bone manifest? What does the internal structure of bone look like and the external structure of bone? Oh, there's blood inside of bone. That's where our red blood cells are produced. That like blood has what? It has iron in it, because that's why it's red. So there are all these things that I was finding on the mountain that matched up perfectly, like one after the other, just like either we're in a simulation and reality is morphing to to meet my wacky thoughts and ideas, and then it's like an egregore. The more people see my videos, the more find these heart stones, and all of a sudden they're showing up everywhere. Maybe they didn't exist before.
Yeah, maybe you're creating this phenomenon.
I mean, it's possible,
It's possible. I mean, it really is possible. I know I keep coming back on this channel to the idea that we're actually, from a shamanic perspective, that we are perceiving the reality that we're experiencing. It's not so much like a a mechanical or a technological simulation. It's the way that energy is focused in the human experience. And so you shift the way you are perceiving it, the way you are assembling your world by shifting the center of the assemblage, you begin shifting the world that you experience.
Mm.
We might call this
Yeah.
we might call this manifestation. And so various techniques for manifestation, things like breaking pattern or uh, using positive thoughts, affirmations, sound technology to change your energy fields, whatever you might do. What you're doing is in this way of looking at things is you're not changing the external reality so much as you're changing the internal perception, and then that has the effect of putting you in a different reality.
Yeah. Well, and when you were talking about that, it reminded me of this whole concept that Jason has talked about of reality tunnels and this idea that errants are resource hogs when it comes to the simulation, right? That we
I love that. Yeah.
we're a pain in the ass for the construct, and so it throws things our way to try and throw us off the scent or trip us up in different ways. But eventually, one of its approaches is just give them what they want, so they'll get lost in whatever their distraction is that they're excited about. But also you get this kind of massing of people, and to be efficient with resources in the simulation, it has to try and funnel groups of people into so this is the whole divide and conquer kind of idea, and getting people to be part of this little clique or that little clique, or believe
Yes.
in this idea or that idea, instead of being open to all things and trying to find where the overlaps are, which is the syncretic approach, and which is also the comparative mythology approach. This is the Joseph Campbell stuff. So I was always interested in that, but I didn't have words for it like syncretism and things until recent years. But that was a fascinating idea that Jason had about errants and reality tunnels. And then he was, synchronicity for me has been a huge one, because I'm like, the synchronicities that have happened to me in my life, especially in the last half a dozen years, are so profound and so, from a mathematical perspective, you couldn't even begin to try to calculate this stuff.
There's no way.
Yeah, and so I've always seen them as little taps on the shoulder from the creator or from angels or whatever's at work, to like, hey, take a look over here, go in this direction, and oh, you're on the right track. And I've always seen them that way. And I heard an interview once with Jason where he was talking about them as a way that AIX tries to distract us into different reality tunnels.
Remember that.
And I was like, okay, that's a different take. I still don't really, that doesn't resonate with me. But if that's the case, then like, what's the point of anything? I don't know. I'm like, because it's the synchronicities that have really kept me going, because I've had so much doubt. I don't have a background in geology or physics or chemistry or any of the really solid, I should have like this solid scientific basis for trying to like take on an ology. I'm not even really interested in taking on an ology. I'm just like, hey, these are the things I found. Mainstream is never going to accept it, so I'll just make a YouTube channel and share it with everyone, so they can decide for themselves if I'm a crackpot or if it's something to look into. And in the course of doing that, it's just kind of snowballed, and discovery after discovery. Like just a couple weeks ago, I from a friend who sent me something, I learned that you can create rubies in a microwave in 10 seconds.
That's insane. I saw that. That is just wild. Absolutely wild to me.
Using plasma, right? Because a microwave is a magnetron. And this guy mixes together chromium oxide and some other powder, mixes them together, puts them in a votive candle, like thick glass thing, so it doesn't burst. Earlier versions that he did burst, and that's one of the majority of the video is his trial and error process, and then the end is the success, where he's basically got a ceramic top and a votive candle thing. He's mixed these two powders together, turns on the microwave literally for 10 seconds, and gets rubies that are like millimeters wide, raw rubies. And these are the second hardest on the hardness scale. you know, the rubies are after diamond.
Yeah, and they're
So
valuable.
I'm like, dude, that, you know, that's like plasma transmutation of elements through plasma to create the second hardest element we know of. Fact, not fiction, not a harebrained idea that instant petrification can take place. There it is, right there, you know. And then since then, I've discovered so many other things like bog bodies and all, you know, stuff where it's like bones are dissolved, but the organs are hardened. Interesting. That could explain why we're finding a lot of petrified organs because, you know, they harden to the point where they're preserved, and then peramineralization takes over, which is like an influx of different minerals that
Yes,
harden
yes.
it to stone, right? So I was originally envisioning like volcanic activity, and then the plasma apocalypse came along. You know, there are all these different ideas I'm toying with, but it started first with the empirical finds. So it's been like it's all been backwards for me. You know, I didn't have any knowledge in the subjects, and all of a sudden I'm kind of thrown into this stuff. And yeah, it's
I
been
would say
such
what
a
you're doing is much closer to the old ideal of scientific inquiry than what's being done these days, where the answers are predetermined before the experiments happen, and we're absolutely closed to possibilities.
yeah, it's
Even
all dogma.
even in the 19th century, the books that Jason's citing, the science of that time, these people were far more open-minded, and I would say they were, you want to talk about giants, they were intellectual giants compared to a lot of scientists these days.
Oh yeah, you read the texts from 100 years ago. I was like, whoa, they knew how to write. They knew they had vocabulary.
Yeah, and they could think. They could
Yeah,
think and ask
and
questions
they
and
didn't have word
think
processors.
together.
They're like writing books from the first line to the end, you
Yeah.
know, on
Amazing.
typewriters or by
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah,
You
like
know,
Dickens was serializing all of his novels just to talk about novels. And so he had to have the whole thing in his mind, and he had to write uh all of the beginning chapters to line up with the end chapters, and he really didn't have any room for mistakes whatsoever, and he practically didn't make any.
mm,
And these
yeah,
were
no, it's
multi-hundred page novels with plot twists and multiple characters and situations. And it's incredible what he was able to do from scratch moving forward. It was just like they were on a totally different wavelength. I know that when I was studying uh, medieval literature and Chaucer back in school, I learned that in those days they weren't writing a lot of this stuff down. It was all oral poetry, and a lot of it was then written down by scribes and that sort of thing. And so
mm,
somebody like Chaucer, who might perform at court, would stand up and deliver an epic poem that could go on for 1 to 2 hours, and he would recite the whole thing from memory, and by all indications there were no mistakes.
yeah.
It was simply
This is like the Iliad and the Odyssey. They were all oral traditions. They weren't written down until much later, right?
so
Um,
the ability, the cognition of these earlier people before they got distracted by whatever it is that's distracting us so much, and we could talk about that another time. But
mental midgets with the memory of mollusks.
that's so
I didn't even mean to do the alliteration there. It just
that's
happened. But
really good.
that's,
I like
you know,
that. Yeah, you definitely have an artistic bent in many ways, and I think even your ability and willingness to look at the world and the way you're doing it is a product of that. And I think that's actually a great resource for a scientist. And we've completely downplayed that and adopted some kind of idea that there is, a
and
kind of
yet
hard and
society,
fast.
yeah, and yet society adores the Renaissance men, right? That's what they were. They were into everything.
Absolutely. They
You
were
know,
not
they were,
compartmentalized, they were. I remember there's a quote even about what a novel is. A novel is something like the last bastion of wholeness in a compartmentalized world, you know.
mm,
You can put all those pieces together and you can write about science and philosophy and religion and poetry and husbandry and everything in the world. And if you are a Renaissance type of person, you can get you can get enough information about all those different topics to put them together in an intelligent way that gives the illusion of reality.
the original swiping, the
The
turning
original
of the
story.
page.
Yeah, I
You
like
know,
that. That's better than what we have now. So you mentioned errands a minute ago, and before we close here, I wanted to just let everybody know that Dr. Mike will be presenting at Errant Fest. We don't know what he's going to be presenting, but we're super happy to have him. We have
Me
an
neither.
amazing lineup. You've got some time.
September, right?
September
Oh,
22nd through the 24th. So,
all right.
breathe a sigh of
Yeah.
relief, but that's going to be really cool. We have he's joining basically just an all-star cast that's going to include Jason Bashir's, Martin Liedke, Waters Above, Max Egan, all kinds of people are going to be
Hmm.
part of that. I'm going to be presenting something. There's let's see, Campbell Purvis of Autodidactic is going to be presenting. There's just a bunch of us, and it's going to be really an amazing 3 days. So I'm
Oh,
looking.
three. Oh, cool.
It's a
Yeah.
3 day thing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So yeah, that's going to be a busy weekend, and I'm hoping that we get a lot of a lot of people showing up also for Saturday night, which is Aaron's Got Talent, which is the music concert of Errant Music. I kind of wanted to reach out to to you and your friend who did that amazing song about flat Earth several years ago that you've used on some of your videos. And
It's not so much about flat Earth as
yeah,
much
it's
as
about
just
conspiracy
questioning, but yeah,
questions.
it's flat Earth is, definitely
So,
sprinkled in there,
if you
especially
had
towards
any
the end.
interest in performing or putting together a video or anything like that that might fit the
Um,
musical slot, just let me know. No pressure.
well, Alex's nickname for me is Brittany because he had to do a lot of post-processing to get me to sound that good.
I
So
thought
I
it was
won't be I
beautiful.
won't be performing live.
Well, it could. Do you have a video of it?
Um, well, right now it's just some visuals that have to do with the great trees, and like my last three live streams I've used as an opener. It's
So
a
that's
song
the
that's never
the
it's
video.
never been published before. It's something he and I collaborated on just after he finished remodeling his studio like 7 years ago, before he ever made his first song, on the subject of flat Earth. We did a collaboration on a couple of songs, and so I sat on it for a long time, and then I released it. But now I've just kind of been using it as an opener because it's a nice thing to for people to listen to with the visuals as they're kind of piling in for the live chats if I do a live stream. And then he and I collaborated on a second song that I've only played one time, and that was on a video that I did called Coronation Day. It was really, I should have called it Anti-Coronation Day, because it was just, my disgust with the whole royal family, their connection to Jimmy Savile, and all, just all the
Yes.
scum, basically. And so that song was called Jingle Jangled. So I told the story of how that song came about, and I played a couple different versions of it in that stream. And that was also a collaboration with Alex, who's a musical genius par excellence, extraordinary talent in every way when it comes to both music and video production. And if people aren't familiar with his work, conspiracy music guru, go and watch every one of his music videos because they are a treat, and they're visual eye candy, and they each and every one of them packs a wallop when it comes to packing a ton of truth into a few minutes of time, and providing evidence for it as well. So
Well, if you would be willing to put me in contact with him, and if you have any ideas yourself for participating in that event, I'm just opening that up. Just if that creative part of you comes out and wants to be a part of the Saturday night music thing, that's an invitation to do that. And we've got a few slots left. We're wanting to make it a long enough concert where people can get together and listen to it and hang out and do like errant parties Saturday night and that sort of thing. And so we're just making it our own little just the fun non-left brain part of the evening where we can just hang out and celebrate musically.
sounds fun. I'll send him this video when you publish it, and he can decide for himself. And I'll put you guys in touch, definitely.
Cool, cool. That sounds great. Well, this has been a blast, a true blast. I feel like I've got some little pieces I want to go research. You put some things together for me. People who may be new to your work, I bet we have some pretty exploded brains going on right now. There's just so much to it, and it's just so vast and fascinating. It's just unbelievable. I have I have visions of your channel just going meteoric and just becoming something just extraordinary as you just add layers of evidence to support your basic thesis here. And so
Yeah,
just
that's what's been happening over the last half a dozen live streams that I've done because I found I suck at short format, and you know, I'm such a perfectionist, and to really get things in a, you know, coherently with narration, and I'm never satisfied with the narration. And it's like some of the videos that I have, that the earlier stuff, like Petrified Titans and Organs Part 1 and 2, they were just kind of summary videos of the research, shorter videos. Each one of those took me about a month to make, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It's just too time consuming. I've got too many other things that just get stacked up. So I realized I could get a lot more out in live streams, and there's a flow, and there's a synergy when there's people watching. And but
very good at it
unfortunately,
too. You create a very welcoming live stream environment. You're
thank
thoughtful.
you.
You don't rush yourself. You engage the chat. It's you're just very
And
good.
I'm not trying to shove ideas down people's throats or tell them what to believe. I'm just, you know, sharing the things that I've been questioning, the stuff I've come across, and you know, and it's been fun to do. But like I said, you know, we live in this mollusk memory time frame, so people want stuff in shorter formats. So that's, you know, it hasn't been my thing because I've been trying to do a short video on the great trees. I've put so many hours into it, and then I get frustrated and I just leave it for a week, and then I, you know, I don't. I want something that's like 10 minutes or less that just packs a wallop with all of the best, you know, information and data. But the amount of time that goes into something like that, I can do 5 live streams, you know, and cover way more information. So
It's true. I think if you're choosing where to put your energy, you know, you just should follow the energy itself, you know. Where is it taking
yeah,
you? Where are you comfortable? That's really what we have to go on, isn't it? You know, what otherwise
yeah.
we're just sort of trying to convince ourselves that we should be a certain way as opposed to just being who we are.
Well said. Yeah, thanks for that. I feel better now. I've been beating flagellating myself. Yeah, it's like, get
That's
to
right.
work on this.
Well, there's two tendencies. There's those people who want those short soundbite types of things, but then a lot of people in this community, in the archaics community, they want more information, they want more data, they want longer longer videos. It's kind of
Yeah,
crazy. So people are kind of going in different directions, it seems to
that's
me.
great. And those are the people I'm, you know, interested in reaching, obviously. Um, but you know, in a 2-hour video, the average watch time will be between 20 and 30 minutes. So there's 1 out of 10 who makes it from beginning to end.
Yes, yes.
And that's a terrible percentage in my opinion. Whereas the 15 to 20 minute videos, you get a much higher completion rate. So if any of your listeners start to watch any of my content and you like it and you find a particular bit, you're like, wow, this was amazing. You know, feel free to drop me a line and let me know timestamp, like this would make a good short video, because I have a whole wealth of content that could be clipped out and into shorter videos, but I just can't stomach spending all the time to go back through my old stuff to try and pick them out. So,
I hear
you
you.
know,
I hear
I
you.
like, there's other channels that have like clip channels, you know, and I could probably do something like that, but it takes
Yeah,
all.
or maybe somebody would be willing to do that for you if you could enter a dialogue and you could trust that person and that sort of thing. You know, I know that's what happened with Jason is there was an Archaics Clips channel that started going, and that has really helped bring awareness to his work.
There was a guy who took my conversation with Jason and did like an outline with timestamps, and it had like, you know, 15 different sections. I'm like, that was awesome. And you know, if
That's
somebody
great.
wants to do that sort of thing, because then I can go listen. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot we talked about that, and I can just pluck that out, and I can do a shorter video because it's going to be repetitious for the people who watch everything I do. But again, that's 1 in 10.
Well,
You
the
know,
other thing,
so
I'll put this out there to the universe or to whoever might be listening. There is some benefactor who did a kind of AI search engine type of thing for Jason's channel where you can go in and type in what you're looking for and it will index the videos and the timestamps with that information.
Oh, wow. I would love to know about that.
So
And in
if this,
fact, I've been wondering, there's got to be a
say
way.
this one thing, if that person, whoever that is, or that force of nature is out there listening and would like to assist Dr. Mike in making his content more indexable so that he can continue creating long form content, but people can then dig down in it with a microscope, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And another thing I've been wondering how to do, there's got to be a way to do it, but I would love to get I mean, obviously there would be errors, but the text from all of the vocals in all the videos, there's got to be a way to using one of the chat GPTs or something to just pull out, because YouTube is automatically generating closed caption stuff, you
Yes.
know, and so that text is there. I would like to get all of the text for my whole channel. So I've just got it in, one or multiple text files, and I can search for different topics because that will help me when I go to start to create a book for some of this stuff as
I
well.
was going to
That's
recommend
definitely,
exactly that. That could be your raw material for a fantastic book.
yeah. I mean, obviously I'd rework the text and everything, but that would be a great starting point so I don't have to do it all from scratch because a lot of the live stuff comes out really well, whereas if I'm trying to type, I can agonize over it and get a little too perfectionist. So
Well, yeah, you can craft all of this. You can mix and match. You can break it into chapters and sections, and then you can put your references and resources and all of that. And then voila, there's a book. You put in your images, and you're off to the races.
totally, that would be awesome. So if anyone knows how to do that, let me know as well.
Okay. So we put out some feelers there. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate
My
that.
pleasure. Thank you for the invite. It was fun. I listened to all three of yours with Jason, and I loved your interviewing style. And so I was looking forward to this conversation. I knew it was going to be fun. So it
Yeah,
was.
well, it was at least for me. So this has been great, and please, everyone, go to at Stellium7, subscribe, watch, leave comments, talk about it, talk amongst yourselves, and until the next time, hopefully this won't be the last time.
Hope not.
All right,
Thanks for the invite.
thank you for accepting. Have a good one.